Hello and welcome back to Tungsten Tales. Today we've got something slightly different for you. We're going to be comparing some of the top players in the PDC order of merit and comparing them to the Premier League football teams. First of all, I have to say this is just completely a bit of fun. It's not to take shots at any of the darts players involved in this video. It's purely just a bit of fun to see what similarities there are between any of the teams and any of the players. And to get some of your guys' opinions as well. So please do let us know on social media at Tungsten Tales on Twitter, Tungsten Tales Darts on Facebook, and of course in the comments below on this YouTube video what you think of my picks, and obviously give us your picks as well. Be interesting to see who you think compares to the Manchester United in the darts world or the Norwich City in the darts world. Yeah, let us know below. So we're going to start from the bottom of the Premier League table, and that is of course Norwich City. For me, an excellent team to watch, and a team that has a lot of potential and has really not quite fulfilled that this season. And that's why I've compared Norwich to Joe Cullen, a player that has showed so much potential over the last two and a half years and hasn't quite got there. A very popular player that plays an excellent style to watch, but hasn't seemed to quite got the results. But hopefully we'll see Joe and we'll see Norwich back up there at some time in the future. The next player up is Steve Beaton, and we've compared him to 19th place Aston Villa. Aston Villa of course got a rich history in English football, the same of course with Steve Beaton as a former champion of the world. Maybe not producing their best football or darts at this moment in time, but obviously got a huge history behind them and a big fan base as well. We know Steve, a very popular player on the tour. Now we know Bournemouth are hanging around the relegation zone in the Premier League, but they've been around for 6 years in the Premier League now. Well, looking to stay a 6th season, should I say. And we know everything about Bournemouth. They're a team that's come from right near the bottom, and now they're playing in one of the top leagues in the world. They play extremely attractive football, and actually I think they're probably one of the more popular teams are among a neutral fan. They're a very popular team amongst football fans in England, and a player that I've compared to them is Dimitri Vandenberg. He's a very likeable young man, and very smiley, always got good spirits, and yeah, he's just a very popular darts player, the same as Bournemouth really. He's maybe not had quite the same rise as Bournemouth, but there's a huge amount of potential in Dimitri Vandenberg, and that's why I've compared him to Bournemouth. The next player on the list is Dave Chisnall. And at the time of writing, West Ham United were just one place above the relegation zone, and that's why I've compared them to Dave Chisnall. Obviously West Ham, we know, absolutely huge club. Of course play at the Olympic Stadium, the London Stadium, and they've got so much going for them. They're a big club, they've got some excellent players, and really you'd like to think West Ham would be a top 10 team in the Premier League, but much like Dave Chisnall, they've not enjoyed the best sort of year, 18 months, but they've got the facilities and they've got everything that's needed, and by that I mean the likes of the scoring and the rhythm. We know once Dave Chisnall gets in a rhythm, he's one of the best players in the world and probably one of the top 180 hitters in the world. To be up there as a top player and a top team. So that's why I've compared Dave Chisnall with West Ham United, currently 16th in the Premier League. The next two teams on my list are Watford and Brighton and Hove Albion. Firstly, I've compared Watford to Darren Webster. Nothing to do with the yellow on the shirt. Of course, Darren is from Norwich and a Norwich City fan, I believe. But they're both gritty teams. They both put in a lot of effort into the game, and Watford are a team that plays some good football but can also have some shockers, and I'm afraid that's what we have seen from Darren Webster over the years. We've seen some absolutely unbelievable performances that have seen him sort of grazing the top 10 in the world, sort of around 11th, 12th, around that mark, but we've also seen a Darren Webster that hasn't really been able to produce, partially because of his injury troubles, as we know, but that's why I've compared him to Watford. And next up, Brighton of Hove Albion, we've compared them to Brendan Dolan. I sort of feel that Brighton get a little bit lost in the shuffle. They've obviously been in the Premier League a few years now. They've done very, very well to stay there. And it's a similar story with Brendan Dolan. He's still a top 32 player really, and he's competing at the top end still. He's actually second if you take out the top 16 in the Pro Tour Order of Merit, and that's why he's actually pretty much confirmed his qualification for the World Match Play. Sort of goes under the radar a little bit, but has enough to produce and actually beat some of the top players in the game. So Brendan Dolan and Brighton, should I say, are a match for me. Next up is Southampton and Newcastle United. First of all, Southampton obviously got a history of producing some of the best young players in the country, and that's why I've actually compared them to Max Hopp. Burst onto the scene as a 16-year-old, making his World Championship debut. A huge amount of potential and a huge amount of expectation on the shoulders of Max Hopp, and it feels like that is a similar case with Southampton. They've had some excellent players over the years, and you always feel they're just one step away from breaking into that sort of top 8, top 7 as a real top team in the Premier League, and it's Max Hopp who's been in that position over the years. We know he's got the darts to beat the best players in the world. It's just a case of finding that extra gear, and that's why I've got him compared to Southampton. As I mentioned, Newcastle, I've compared them to Stephen Bunting. A huge team with a massive fan base, and you have to say Stephen Bunting is a very, very popular character in the game. Of course, a former world champion as well. It's got to be said at the Lakeside all those years ago. Stephen Bunting has got so much going for him. He's got his mental side of the game sorted now, and he's producing some excellent darts. He's not had the best of luck against the biggest names in the world, your likes of your Michael van Gerwen and your Peter Wrights, but if you take Stephen Bunting for what he is, then he's a top player, and there's no reason why he can't go on and be a top 10 player in the near future. Closing off the bottom half of the Premier League table, and it's Everton next up, and I've compared them to James Wade. Feels like Everton have been a very sort of nearly club over the years. Obviously, they haven't won some silverware in a long time now, but they've always been in and around and really competing at the top end of the Premier League, looking at those European spots. And it's a similar story with James Wade. We know James obviously has won plenty of titles, but on the big stage, on the Alexander Palace stage, he's never quite produced his best darts. And I feel like that draws quite a lot of parallels to what we see at Everton Football Club. Not quite been able to reach that final stage and really put his nail in as one of the best players in the world, as a world champion anyway. And that's why I've got him compared to Everton. The final team, I have to say, in the bottom half is Burnley. And I think for a few obvious reasons I've compared Burnley to Mensur Suljovic. They have their doubters, shall we say, Burnley. They have a lot of people that don't like their style of play. They're a little bit methodical in that way, and it's a similar story with Mensur. Obviously he's not the quickest on the hockey. There's lots of people that don't really enjoy that, but you've got to say he gets the job done. Of course, he's made a match play final. He's won the Champions League of darts. He gets results, and that's exactly what Burnley do. Moving into the top half, and we've got Krzysztof Ratajski, of course the Polish Eagle, and he's compared to the Eagles, Crystal Palace. We've seen Krzysztof jump into the top 16 in the last week or so, and that's a little bit like what Palace have done this season. They're in the top 10, and they've really surprised a lot of people with that. They're a very popular team amongst neutrals. They sort of get on with the job without too much fuss. And Krzysztof's a very popular guy. There's not much you can say in a negative vein about Krzysztof, and that's why I've compared him to Crystal Palace. The next player is Adrian Lewis, and if you know your Premier League table, I'm comparing him to Arsenal, a team that's obviously got a huge amount of history. Of course, Premier League champions multiple times, much like Adrian Lewis as a two-time back-to-back world champion, but maybe not enjoying their best year or so. Of course, Adrian is now outside the top 16 in the world in 13th position on the Order of Merit, and Arsenal are 9th in the league and not enjoying a good Premier League season at all. But we both know what Adrian can produce. If he can find the form of those years where he won the World Championship, then there's no reason why he can't do that again. And I feel like it's a similar story with Arsenal. They've got some huge players, some excellent players, and if they find their form, they're going to be a huge threat once again. The next two on my list are Sheffield United and Spurs. Starting with Sheffield United, I've compared them to Chris Dobey. Obviously both have had a rise up the ranks in recent years. Obviously Sheffield United from League One now to the top half of the Premier League. Chris Dobey has come from Norwich Darts, and he's now a firm favourite and a firm fixture in the top 32, edging towards the top 16 in the world, and he's really a threat now in the major tournaments. We've seen him make a Grand Prix semi-final, should I say. We've seen him make a couple of quarter-finals on the TV stage as well, and that's why I've got him compared to Sheffield United. The rise up the ranks, and obviously some very, very hard-working players and teams involved as well. As I said, Spurs next up, and I've compared them to Michael Smith. Spurs are a team that's been very much the nearly men over the recent years. They've made a Champions League final. They've pushed Liverpool and Man City all the way in the Premier League. And Michael Smith's a player that's been so close to capturing that major crown at the match play at the Premier League, and of course at the World Championships as well. If you feel like it's only a matter of time with Michael Smith, it's the same with Spurs. With players like Son and Harry Kane, there's no way they can't capture a piece of silverware in the next few years, and that's why I've compared them to Michael Smith. There's no way Michael Smith's going another 18 months without not getting a major crown. Now, sixth in the Premier League table are Wolves, a team that's enjoyed a lot of success over the last couple of years. Of course, won the Championship, made it into the Europa League last year, and are actually very much knocking on the door of the top four, with some superb performances and some very stable management, it has to be said. And I've compared them to Nathan Aspinall. Much like Wolves, they've risen up the ranks in recent years, and now they're looking at the top four. Obviously, Nathan's had plenty of success on the TV stage, of course in the US Darts Masters and the UK Open, most notably. They're both very likeable. They've both produced some excellent, very watchable darts and football, it has to be said. And with Wolves looking into the top four, there's no reason why Nathan can't get there as well. He's producing some excellent stuff of late, and with the summer series and the match play just around the corner, I do expect to see some performances from Nathan in those tournaments. Now, here's one I was really struggling to categorise, and it's Manchester United. Obviously a team of huge proportions, a team that's got countless Premier League, Champions League, FA Cup titles, and it was hard to sort of compare them to anybody on the current order of merit. So I've actually compared them to Phil Taylor. Obviously 16 world titles for Phil, many Premier League titles for Manchester United, but maybe not at the moment producing their best football. Obviously Phil's retired at the moment, but it sort of feels like Manchester United aren't really a threat at the top end of the Premier League. Obviously that's not able to be the case with Phil, so it's the only logical conclusion I could come to with Manchester United and compare them to Phil the Power Taylor. The next team on my list is Chelsea, and I've compared them to Gerwyn Price, a team that throws a lot of money at their players, a team that's had mixed success, shall we say. We've seen them produce some excellent football and win trophies in the last 5 or 6 years. Of course, Premier League champions not so long ago. Of course, the Europa League as well. Gerwyn Price, we've seen him on the Grand Slam stage, get the results, get the job done, but not on the Premier League or the likes of the match play in the World Championship stage just as yet. So there are comparisons. It was a bit of a loose one, this one, I have to say, but I've compared Chelsea to Gerwyn Price. Now, as we move into the top 3 in the Premier League table, we've got Leicester City, and I've compared them to Rob Cross. Obviously, Rob, a couple of years ago, had that World Championship win pretty much from out of nowhere, you have to say, and it came at a similar sort of time as Leicester City winning the Premier League. Obviously, they were 5,000 to 1 to win the Premier League that season. Rob Cross not quite at the same odds, but there are comparisons there. With Leicester City now, they're maybe not quite title contenders, but you have to say they have the capabilities to beat anybody in the Premier League, and they have some excellent players. It's a similar story with Rob Cross. He's maybe not challenging the top 2 or 3 in the Premier League. It's a similar story with Rob Cross. He's maybe not quite challenging the top 2 or 3 in the order of merit, but he is indeed a challenger in every tournament he enters. Now, second in the Premier League, of course, is Man City, a team that's enjoyed an incredible amount of success in the last 5 years, and that's why I've compared them to Michael van Gerwen. They've won the Premier League the last couple of years, of course. They've won the FA Cup. They've won pretty much everything there is to win, apart from the Champions League, of course. And Michael van Gerwen, we know how dominant he's been over the last couple of years, and that's why there is definite comparisons with Manchester City. They finished second this season, of course. Well, you like to think they're gonna complete that second place finish, but obviously Michael van Gerwen at the World Championship coming runner-up to Peter Wright, and that, I think, make it obvious who I've got at number 1. Yes, it is Peter Wright, and I've compared him, obviously, to the new Premier League champions, Liverpool. They've run away with it this year, obviously, Liverpool. And Peter Wright, for me, was the best player at that World Championship. He ran away with the final. There was never in doubt he was going to win that final once the first 3 or 4 sets were underway. And after a long wait, Peter Wright, at the age of 50, is a world darts champion. And it's a similar story, of course, for Liverpool supporters. They've waited so long for a Premier League title, and now they have the right to be called a Premier League winner, alongside some of the greats in the game. So I've been comparing the Premier League football teams all the way to their darts adversaries. There's definitely been some ideal comparisons in this video, if not some maybe slightly dodgy ones as well. Let us know your comparisons down below, what you think is compared from a darts player to the relevant Premier League teams. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the like button, and share this video if you want plenty of more people to get involved in Tungsten Tales Darts. I've been Josh Green, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you soon on Tungsten Tales.